Welcome to A Line Through Time, where I take the time to look through your favourite franchises and work out how it all lines up. Now I bet some of you are thinking,
Call of Duty 4. Modern gay fuck stupid.
Story doesn't matter in a cacophony game. Well, first off, get fucked. Second, I needed a subject to cover in November. Call of Duty usually releases in November, and now I'm exactly twice the age of the average COD player, so it seemed like a fine time to cover it. Just keep in mind that I'm not covering any of the side modes like Extinction, Exo Zombies, and especially not Classic Zombies. That shit gets crazy, and I'm not getting into it here. Not yet, anyway. Also keep in mind that a lot of foreign names are going to come up and I'm going to try my best to get them right, but no promises. Call of Duty began life back in 2002. After developing Medal of Honor Allied Assault at 2015 Inc., 22 team members left the company to form Infinity Ward, where they would develop a rival game with an emphasis on being part of a squad rather than a lone gunman. Thus, 2003's Call of Duty proved quite successful for the new studio. In terms of story, early COD games were more focused on being general simulations of the real campaigns of World War II. All three campaigns follow single soldiers from 1942 to 1945 and are played in sequence. The American campaign follows the 506th Parachute Infantry Regiment from Operation Overlord to the Battle of the Bulge. The British campaign follows the 6th Airborne Division from Operation Tonga to the capture of Bergsteinfurt, and the Russian campaign spans from Stalingrad up to the storming of the Reichstag building and the surrender of Germany. With the game's success, Infinity Ward got started on a sequel, but publisher Activision wasn't satisfied with just that. Even before the franchise was a juggernaut of the industry, Activision was milking the series for all it was worth. As such, September 2004 saw the release of the expansion pack Call of Duty United Offensive, developed by Grey Matter Interactive, which was folded into Treyarch towards the end of development. Again, there are three campaigns. The American campaign follows the Bastogne campaign of 1944, the British campaign follows an RAF gunner who is shot down in 1941 and aids the Dutch resistance, while the Russian campaign spans the Battle of Kursk to the Belgorod-Kharkov offensive operation in 1943. Only 2 months later, Spark Unlimited's Call of Duty Finest Hour released on 6th generation consoles. Once again, there are three campaigns with the usual Allied nations as the focus, but themed around different theatres of war and featuring 6 playable characters. The Eastern Front kicks things off with Stalingrad and Operation Little Saturn, the North Africa campaign follows a British commando team in Tunisia, and the Western Front gives us Sergeant Chuck Walker, the Americanist of Americans, and a black tank commander in campaigns around the Rhine. October 2004 saw Infinity Ward's follow-up Call of Duty 2 released as an Xbox 360 launch title. Once again, Soviet, British and American campaigns. Russian goes from Moscow to Stalingrad, British is in North Africa, and American goes from Pointe du Hoc to the Rhine. This series really loves the Rhine, but perhaps the more interesting title came the following month in the form of Treyarch's Call of Duty 2 Big Red 1 for the previous generation. As the name suggests, the game forgoes the usual campaign structure and instead follows a single group, the US 1st Infantry Division nicknamed the Big Red 1, from North Africa to Sicily to Omaha to the Siegfried Line. 1 year and 6 days later, Treyarch put out another title, Call of Duty 3 on 7th gen systems, marking the commencement of the main series alternating releases between Infinity Ward and Treyarch to maintain a yearly release schedule. This time there are 4 campaigns that focus on the post-D-Day push into France known as the Fillet Pocket. The player moves between fucking Tom Cruise, British/French, Canadian and even a Polish tank squad. It also advanced the gameplay of first-person shooters as a whole by introducing sprinting and knife attacks, which would carry over to the rest of the genre once the series took off. 2007 was kicked off with Amaze Entertainment's PSP title Call of Duty Road to Victory, which brought the war to portable systems through the eyes of American, British and Canadian forces across 7 famous operations. November of that year would change the gaming landscape forever. While other developers continued work on World War II games, Infinity Ward wanted to try something different. After all, the market was utterly oversaturated with games set in that period, like Medal of Honor, Battlefield, Wolfenstein, Brothers in Arms, Commandos and Freedom Force vs. the Third Reich. The solution was to move the series forward in time, while Treyarch would develop another World War II game just in case Call of Duty 4 was a failure. But as I'm sure you all know, Modern Warfare shot the franchise into the stratosphere with its expansive multiplayer suite, bold new setting, and interesting campaign. The campaign in this game centers on a fictional war, somewhat inspired by current events. It follows 2 separate yet related stories that overlap, allowing certain events to be seen from multiple perspectives across 6 total characters. The plot follows SAS recruit John Soap McTavish and US Marine Sergeant Paul Jackson in dealing with Russian ultranationalists and their Middle Eastern allies who enact a coup in 2011 and have access to nuclear weapons. The Americans battle the villains up front while the British move behind the scenes to deal with Zakhaev, the leader of the ultranationalists. There is also a much beloved flashback mission about Soap's commanding officer, Captain John Price, attempting to assassinate Zakhaev in 1996. Eventually, one of the nukes is detonated and Jackson is killed in one of gaming's most shocking and memorable moments, whose impact the series would repeatedly try to match, with unfortunately middling results. Soap is able to kill Zakhaev and the game ends, unless you count the unrelated Mile High Club bonus mission about an SAS team raiding a plane to take out some terrorists. Now here's where things start to get interesting. Despite there being a Captain Price in both early games and Modern Warfare suggesting a familial connection and a shared continuity, the World War II games are considered to be in their own continuity separate from all the rest, despite the fact that World War II does canonically happen in all the timelines. So this gives us the World War II timeline and the Modern Warfare timeline. The former is a series of games whose events constantly overlap, so a timeline is difficult to form, and the latter is just a present day and the two flashback missions for now. The same day as the console release, a DS version of COD 4 was released. This one is supplementary material, placing the player in the shoes of SAS and Marine Corps operatives participating in smaller missions parallel to the main plot. 2008 gave us Treyarch's Call of Duty World at War, which, as I said before, was another World War II game presumably made as a fallback in case the fanbase rejected Modern Warfare. So, number 5 was more violent than the previous game to show the true horrors of war. The story opens with a tortured American POW named Miller being rescued by his commanding officer, who is voiced by Kiefer Sutherland.
Miller, you're okay. What took you so long?
The campaigns don't play one after the other like previous World War II games, but instead alternate across the entire campaign like in Modern Warfare. They follow Miller fighting the Japanese in the Pacific, and a Russian named Dmitry in a grittier take on Stalingrad and Berlin. There were also supposed to be shorter campaigns set in Holland and the Rhineland, but they actually showed some restraint on the Rhine for once and cut both. Despite being another World War II game, World at War is set in a separate timeline that leads into Treyarch's subsequent Black Ops series, making this the Black Ops timeline. Presumably this was done to prevent the multiple developers from being constrained by a shared continuity. Alongside the main game there were two supplementary titles. Rebellion released World at War Final Fronts on the PS2. This one follows American action in the Pacific, as well as American and British troops in Europe across 4 campaigns which, as the title suggests, deal with the victory on those 2 fronts. Some details contradict the main game, such as neither of Miller's allies dying or the presence of another Miller, so we'll say those details aren't canon, but the rest are. The other game was the DS version of World at War. This one features American, British and Russian soldiers taking part in the battles from the other versions, but in supporting roles. So even in a new timeline, the World War II games all overlap deeply with one another. 2009 saw Infinity Ward capitalise on COD 4's success with Modern Warfare 2, renamed to Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2 before release, because how could you possibly think removing the COD name was a good idea? Anyway, the game picks up in 2016 and again follows British and American soldiers dealing with Russian ultranationalists. After Vladimir Makarov enacts a terror attack at an airport in Russia, a scene that was highly controversial at the time and gave the player the option to skip it, he pins it on an undercover agent sent by the Americans, so Russia declares war and invades the US. The player switches back and forth between doing literally everything as Army Ranger James Ramirez fighting off the invasion, and Gary Roach Sanderson, protege of Soap from the first game and member of international counter-terrorist group Task Force 141. Roach is murdered by the US's General Shepard, who was working with Makarov to secure a blank check from the government after losing most of his command in the nuclear detonation in the first game. Soap and Price track him down and kill him, but are branded war criminals and Task Force 141 is disavowed, while Ramirez kicks the Russians out of Washington and is never heard from again. Modern Warfare Mobilized released on the DS the same day, dealing with a Middle Eastern prince acquiring a nuke to use against the ultranationalists 5 years after COD 4, the same year as MW2. I've seen it suggested that it's set in an alternate timeline, but only on Wikipedia and nowhere else. We'll just assume that this is part of the same timeline and include it. The following day, Storm Productions released Modern Warfare 2 Ghost, a 6-issue miniseries taking place between the two main games and exploring the origin of Ghost, a character from the second game who proved very popular, as you'll see later. Naturally, this takes place between the two main games. In 2010, Treyarch followed up World at War with Black Ops, which moved the series into the Cold War. It's kind of funny, really, that a series that started as a World War II series, in which Russia is one of the 3 primary hero factions, would then go and release 4 or 5 games where the Russians are the villains as soon as they move away from World War II. I suppose it's historically appropriate, at least. Following a failed assassination of Fidel Castro in 1961, CIA operative Alex Mason is captured and brainwashed by the Russians and is implied to have assassinated John F. Kennedy. While imprisoned, Mason befriends Viktor Reznov, the Russian commanding officer from World at War. Reznov helps Mason escape to get revenge on those behind the brainwashing, who also murdered Dmitry from World at War. While undertaking missions in Vietnam in 1968, Mason's team uncovers the villain's plot to perform a gas attack on the US, which Mason was supposed to take part in, but instead he kills the Ruski and saves America, fuck yeah. And since CIA doesn't flow well in a sentence, I'm just going to call it the agency because I'm sick to death of flubbing these lines. The DS version of Black Ops follows a number of agency operations in 63, 67 and 68. The mobile version follows yet more agency ops in 67. In March 2011, a live-action short film named Find Makarov releases an alleged teaser for Modern Warfare 3. This earned the attention of Activision, who didn't DMCA or C&D the team behind the video, but instead actually funded Find Makarov Operation Kingfish, which is confirmed to be canon. It takes place before MW2 and shows how Price was captured and locked in the gulag Soap's team frees him from in the game. Continuity is a bit of a mess because Soap was supposed to think Price died at the end of the first game and didn't know he was alive until the gulag, but here's what I'm pretty sure is official artwork of Operation Kingfish with Price in it, so who even knows. So that's a bit of a mess, but since Ghost is present, it takes place after the comic. Modern Warfare 3 released in November, but there was a problem. In 2012, Jason West, director of Call of Duties 2, 4 and 6, as well as Infinity Ward CEO Vince Zampella, were both let go by Activision for alleged breaches of contract. NW3 was halfway through development at the time, so the game not only needed a new director, but Sledgehammer Games were taking off their own third-person action spin-off to help finish the game. It's not surprising then that MW3 is a bit of a mess. For a start, the American side of the campaign sees the Russian invasion repelled in the first couple of missions, leading to a Russian invasion of Europe. All of it. At once. Even though Europe wasn't involved in the airport massacre and the Russian president is on his way to negotiate peace while this is going on. Soap and Price meanwhile are joined by Makarov's former friend Yuri. Soap is killed by bleeding out from the leg despite surviving the knife Shepard put in his chest in the last game, and Price hunts down Makarov and hangs him. It's a kind of underwhelming conclusion to the trilogy really. The hardened edition of the game includes Soap's journal, which tells the events from his perspective from COD 4 up until his death. From the order events are listed in, it seems to suggest that the Mile High Club mission from COD 4 takes place after Operation Kingfish but before NW2. The DS companion, Modern Warfare 3 Defiance, takes place during the latter half of MW2 following American and British troops battling the Russians across the US. It was around this point where internet discourse on the series became a lot more negative, turning it into the biggest punching bag since Insert Celebrity Domestic Abuse Victim here. As such, Activision decided to turn the 2-year cycle into a 3-year cycle, with a Sledgehammer game releasing between Infinity Ward and Treyarch, thereby giving each title 3 years of development for extra polish. Treyarch were already well underway with development of Black Ops 2, which released in November 2012. COD Blocks 2 has an interesting campaign that not only jumps back and forth between 2 time periods, but also features narrative choices that affect the final outcome with multiple endings. The 2 time periods are continuing the story of Alex Mason from 1986 to 1989 and his son David in 2025, with Raul Menendez, a South American warlord Alex and crew dealt with in the 80s, returning and taking control of America's unmanned drones. Canonically, David kills Menendez and his followers rise up, setting the stage for Black Ops 3. A day later, Black Ops Declassified released for the PlayStation Vita. The campaign is a series of short vignettes following Mason and his team on agency operations between 1975 and 1979. The game received overly negative reviews from critics, and developer Instigate Games shut its doors soon after. There was also a short story released on Amazon Kindle titled Rightful King, following a 10-year-old Menendez in 1973. September 2013 gave us the mobile game Call of Duty Strike Team, set in the Black Ops timeline in 2020, but with no real story beyond do missions. Infinity Ward's Call of Duty Ghosts is an interesting title. First off, being an Infinity Ward game that features a unit called the Ghosts, who wear balaclavas with skull patterns on them and have a dog named Riley, as in Simon Ghost Riley, one would think this is a continuation of the Modern Warfare series, but it's oddly not. Instead, the game is set in an all-new timeline, the Ghosts timeline. The story follows South America uniting to form the Federation to steal the US's orbital superweapon and take over the North. The weapon is seized in 2017, the main story jumps forward to 2027, and main antagonist Gabriel Rourke was captured and brainwashed by the Federation in 2015. In the end, Rourke captures protagonist Logan Walker as set up for a second Ghost that will likely never come. See, the reception of Ghosts was on the lower end of the mainline series, so Infinity Ward did something completely different for their next game. Even so, Activision released another short story, Devil's Breath, which details Rourke's transformation from a Ghost into a Federation agent. It's apparently no longer available and labelled as out of stock despite being digital. I'm guessing angry fanboys are to blame? Ghost is kind of the World at War of the second transition, like how that game stuck to World War II in case the move to Modern Warfare was unsuccessful. This game stuck to Modern Warfare in case the move to futuristic settings failed, which it didn't. Sledgehammer made a big splash with its first solo entry in the franchise, 2014's Call of Duty Advanced Warfare, which starts yet another new timeline that centers on cybernetic augmentation. The game moved away from narration, maps and computer images to bridge the gap between missions in favour of fully animated cutscenes using the likenesses of the cast including Troy Baker and Kevin Spacey. The story opens on American soldiers helping repel a North Korean invasion of South Korea in 2054, where protagonist Jack Mitchell loses both his arm and his best friend. After pressing X to pay respects, his friend's father, played by Kevin Spacey, offers him a place on his PMC with advanced prosthetics. The story continues through 2061 with Mitchell and his team discovering that Spacey isn't on the up and up, surprise surprise, and is actually planning worldwide terror attacks with a bioweapon. Spacey is dealt with and the story ends. Could make for a good sequel, but it's fine as a standalone. Now get this, the China exclusive free-to-play microtransaction game Call of Duty Online entered open beta on the 11th of January 2015 after its closed beta 2 years prior. This game is actually set in the Modern Warfare timeline in 2013 with a new Task Force 141 member working with Price Soap and Ghost on a series of missions prior to Operation Kingfish. And the villains are mixing the Nova 6 gas from Black Ops and Element 115 from Zombies. It's so fucking weird, I love it. Next was Black Ops 3 in November. Picking up in 2065, 40 years after Blops 2, Blops 3 follows a customizable cyborg super soldier. The player, who has no name, goes up against the ally Taylor and his team who have been infected with an AI that turns them evil. The player is able to destroy the AI in a simulation inside their own mind and seems to be taken over by Taylor, but Taylor's reports in the load screen suggest that the player died at the start of the game during surgery and that this is a simulation based on a mission where Taylor took on a rogue team of former allies who starred in the Black Ops 3 Dark Horse prequel comic? Maybe? And then when you're inside what is definitely the simulation at the end of the game, the Taylor you team up with is actually the player, and you, the player, are Taylor, and then you purge Taylor, who is actually the player, from the DNI, and destroy the AI, and Taylor gets control of his body again. Even the Call of Duty wiki seems unclear on what is and isn't real, with different articles having different takes on the matter. Like, was it all a simulation after the first mission, or is it just up to a certain point, and then you're out of the simulation, and then in another simulation? It's a mess, I can't do this. But while I utterly despise the "it was all a dream" ending almost as much as the "everyone gets amnesia" ending, the fact that the game is so unclear about what's happening and that explanation about the simulation does match up with everything that's going on to some degree, we'll just have to assume that the game is indeed a simulation and the player is dead. Unlike Advanced Warfare, Black Ops 3 did get a short story, Version, which stands for Virtual Evaluation of Response Similarities in Organic Networks. This has two time periods, 2037 Singapore and 2063 Switzerland. And this brings us to 2016 with Infinity Ward's Call of Duty Infinite Warfare. You may have noticed that Call of Duty uses the word warfare in the same way DC uses crisis and Marvel uses secret and wars. In this game, Kit Harington plays the leader of the villainous space army attacking Earth in 20XX, I guess. It's one of those colony war storylines where humanity expands out into space and the colonies start getting funny ideas, which I can only imagine started as biting satire on US foreign policy. By the time I started writing this script, I hadn't actually played Infinite Warfare, so I just assumed that Jon Snow died and the Earth forces acquired a superweapon that would make America, I mean the colonies, think twice before starting shit with other countries. Truly a future we should all aspire to create. It's been suggested that this game might actually be in the far future in the Modern Warfare timeline, and while that could work, there's nothing concrete, just a few nods here and there that could simply be Easter eggs. As such, we'll place it in the Infinite Warfare timeline. For 2017, we have Sledgehammer's Call of Duty World War II, the first return to the last great conflict since 2008. This game released today and or this month, so there's no way I will have had a chance to play it by the time this video releases. That may seem to make this video go against my rule of only covering series where I can explain the entire plot, but really, it's just another World War II Call of Duty game which is either another new timeline, further stories in the original timeline, or a prequel to Advanced Warfare. We'll just say it's the original timeline for now and explore this in more depth at a later date. Surprisingly, there have been a fair few COD games proposed that never made it. There was a Finest Hour sequel that was cancelled after Finest Hour went way over budget, a third-person shooter set in Italy, a strategy game, a card game, a game set in ancient Rome, and Sledgehammer's cancelled action-adventure game set in Vietnam. It's a shame really, because some of these ideas sounded pretty cool and could have breathed some new life into the series. Now, for the final overview, I'm going to leave out World War II, Ghosts, Advanced Warfare, and Infinite Warfare, since those are basically just one story each. Modern Warfare and Black Ops, meanwhile, are much more extensive, so we'll be focusing on those instead. So without further ado, the most important Call of Duty timelines go a little something like this. Modern Warfare timeline, Winter 1996. SAS Captain Macmillan and Lieutenant John Price are sent to assassinate Russian ultranationalist Imram Zakhaev. Zakhaev loses an arm but is saved by his protege, Vladimir Makarov. 2011, Sergeant John Soap McTavish is inducted into Captain Price's SAS unit. With help from Zakhaev, Khaled al-Assad enacts a coup d'etat and executes President al-Fulani. Price's team works with American forces under the command of Lieutenant General Shepard to hunt the masterminds down, but Makarov detonates a nuclear weapon, eradicating the American forces. Price executes al-Assad and leads his team against Zakhaev to prevent a nuclear strike against the US. After remotely destroying the missile, Soap shoots and kills Zakhaev. The incident is covered up by governmental bodies. The multinational anti-terror organization Task Force 141 is formed by Soap and Shepard. While on a hostage rescue mission in the Ukraine, Shepard recruits Simon Ghost Riley after the latter kills Mexican drug kingpin Manuel Roba. 2013, July. Task Force 141 uncover evidence that their own Colonel Winston Harker is creating dirty bombs with Nova 6 and Element 115. August. Task Force 141 operative Rook puts a stop to Harker's plans. 8th of October. Task Force 141 and Delta Force Team Metal enact Operation Kingfish to capture Makarov. The team is ambushed and forced to retreat, leaving Price behind. Price is then imprisoned in a Russian gulag. Sometime later, Task Force 141 conducts an operation to save a hostage from ultranationalists aboard a plane. 2016. 10th of August. Shepard assigns Army Ranger Joseph Allen to infiltrate Makarov's inner circle as a patsy. 12th of August. With assistance from Shepard, Makarov enacts a massacre at Zakhaev International Airport, leaving Allen for dead and pinning the blame on the US. In retaliation, Russia declares war and invades the US. 14th of August. Task Force 141 tracks down and frees Price before continuing the hunt for Makarov. 15th of August. After receiving a blank check from the Secretary of Defense, Shepard betrays both Makarov and Task Force 141, killing operatives Roach and Ghost. 16th of August. Makarov provides Shepard's location to Price and Soap, and the two hunt down and kill him. Task Force 141 is disavowed, and the two are soon joined by Makarov's former comrade, Yuri. 17th of August. The Russian invasion is repelled by Team Metal and American and British Special Forces, leading to a Russian invasion of Europe. 3rd of October. While flying to Hamburg to negotiate peace, President Vorshevsky is abducted by Makarov to secure nuclear launch codes. 11th of October. Makarov discovers a plan to assassinate him and lays an explosive trap, mortally wounding Soap. He succumbs to his wound soon after. 14th of October. Price and Yuri work with Team Metal to rescue Vorshevsky from a diamond mine in Siberia. Vorshevsky successfully negotiates peace, ending the war. Task Force 141 is reinstated to continue the hunt for Makarov. 21st of January 2017. Price and Yuri track Makarov to the Hotel Oasis in the Arabian Peninsula. They assault the hotel, resulting in the deaths of both Yuri and Makarov. Black Ops Timeline. September 1st, 1939. World War II begins. September 17th, 1942. Viktor Reznov survives a fountain massacre in Stalingrad alongside Dmitry Petrenko. 1945. April 30th. Reznov and Petrenko take part in the siege of the Reichstag building. With help from Reznov, Petrenko plants the Russian flag atop the building, signaling the end of the war in Europe. September 2nd. World War II ends in Allied victory. October 29th. Reznov and Petrenko accompany General Nikita Dragovich in tracking German scientists to the Arctic Circle. Dragovich tests the Nova 6 gas on a number of his soldiers, including Petrenko, killing them. Reznov is imprisoned in the Gulag, Vorkuta. April 17th, 1961. Alex Mason and Frank Woods undertake a CIA operation to assassinate Fidel Castro. The operation is a failure and Mason is captured by Castro and Dragovich. He is sent to Vorkuta to be brainwashed as part of Dragovich's long-term plans. Mason's brainwashing is overwritten by Reznov to hunt down Dragovich and his allies. 1963, October 6th. Reznov stages a prison break during which Mason escapes while Reznov and the other escapees are killed. November 10th. President John F. Kennedy briefs Mason on a mission to assassinate Dragovich. November 22nd. Mason takes part in the Kennedy assassination. 1968, February 23rd. Mason infiltrates Rebirth Island and assassinates Friedrich Steiner. Mason is captured by operative Jason Hudson. February 25th. Through intense interrogation, Hudson learns from Mason of Dragovich's plan to use sleeper agents to release Nova 6 across the US. February 26th. Mason and Hudson lead an assault on Dragovich's ship, where Mason kills him. 1979. Mason's son David is born. September 25th, 1986. Mason and Woods attempt to capture drug lord Manuel Menendez in his home in Nicaragua. Menendez's sister, Josefina, is killed by a grenade thrown by Woods. Menendez is wounded and presumed dead. September 20th, 1989. Woods and Mason use Manuel Noriega in a prisoner exchange for Menendez. Wood shoots Menendez, only to discover it was actually Mason. Wood is crippled and captured by Menendez, who holds Woods, Hudson and David captive. He tortures and executes Hudson and leaves. Woods is discharged from the military and raises David as a son. 1996. David enlists in the US Navy. 2025, April 19th. Menendez resurfaces and begins plotting an assault on the US. David becomes a Navy SEAL commander. June 18th. Menendez allows himself to be captured to upload a virus to the US command network, taking control of the US drone fleet. June 19th. Menendez uses the drone to attack the G20 summit in Los Angeles, where he is killed by David. 2026. DARPA begins development of cybernetic augmentations. June 2nd, 2060. The Coalescence Corporation performs illegal human experiments in Singapore, connecting the direct neural interfaces of involuntary test subjects to a central mainframe. Their minds coalesce to form the Corvus AI, triggering a systematic shutdown and releasing Nova 6, resulting in over 300,000 deaths. 2064, June 2nd. A Winslow Accord team led by Dylan Stone discovers the experiment that created Corvus. After reporting their discovery, they are targeted for termination and go underground. John Taylor and Jacob Hendricks are sent to eliminate them. June 9th. After eliminating the rest of the team, Taylor kills Stone but is wounded in the process. He is then put forward for the Cyber Soldier program. 2065, October 27th. Hendricks and Taylor take part in a hostage rescue operation in Ethiopia. A comrade is critically wounded during the mission but is saved by Taylor. October 29th. Hendricks and the comrade undergo augmentation, but the latter dies during surgery. Taylor interfaces with their DNI to save them, allowing their mind to live on inside Taylor's DNI, forming a virtual world based on Taylor's memories of hunting Stone. Corvus is awoken by this and attempts to discover how it came to be. It infects Taylor's team and has them play the roles of Stone's team inside the simulation, while the dead soldier assumes Taylor's role, eventually killing them all. November 6th. Hendricks attempts to assassinate the head of Coalescence, Sebastian Kruger. The dead soldier takes control of Taylor's body to stop Hendricks but fails. They kill Hendricks and attempt suicide to ensure Corvus ends with them. Corvus pulls them into the simulation and learns from Kruger that its creation was an accident. After killing Kruger, Corvus is purged from the DNI by Taylor and his comrade, allowing the latter's consciousness to finally rest. At least, I think that's what happens. Yeah, like I said, Black Ops 3's story is a bit complicated, and people still think this is just a series of dumb shooting brown people simulators. I can't wait to get around to Zombies, where we deal with multiple dimension theory and have a timeline that branches off from the main Black Ops timeline. That'll be fun. But you know what's the weirdest thing about the COD series? Remember when a few of the games like Modern Warfare 2, Black Ops and Ghosts had Eminem songs attached? Like, Avenged Sevenfold I get, but Eminem? I used to think that was a really weird choice, but then I had an epiphany. Eminem was chosen because the persona he presents is the perfect representation of the average COD fan. He's angry, immature, has way too much time and money on his hands, and spends all day calling people faggots. If you like this video, why not subscribe and check out some of these other videos? If not, then make sure to share it with your enemies so they can suffer along with you. Oh, and COD Heroes is a thing that exists, I guess.
So trusted you. I thought I could too. So why in bloody hell does Makarov know you?
Yuri, ex-Spetsnaz. Only man I know who hates Makarov more than you. Only man I know who hates Makarov more than you. Hates Makarov more than you.